This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Bianca Thomas. And welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited.
Well, it's fun to talk to people from around the world to give people a little background. We've been on the air since 2016. We have over 1,200 episodes, and we
Whoa.
like to interview people live. That's our jam. That's how we do things. But well, I want to thank you for being on the show today. And before we get to the heart of your story, we always ask every guest a couple questions.
Mm.
What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Ooh, good question. What motivates me is my own inner drive to become the greatest version of myself that I can be. And that actually is at the heart of my story and why I do everything that I do. The short version, and then I can dive into the long version after, is I felt incapable and not good enough my entire life. And I kept repeating patterns over and over again that basically just proved to me that that was the case. And when it finally came to my attention that I could get out of this and make something bigger for myself, I knew that I had to. And I knew that because of the trauma that I experienced and the pain that I had endured, this was the life that I needed to live to get out of that and to overcome that. And now I get to help others do the same.
Okay, you kind of got out of the depths of like an imposter syndrome type of situation, and we're able to be able to pass it on and pass it forward. Pay it forward as like a
To say the
mentor.
least. To say the least. Yeah. I grew up as a so I'm the middle child of a very, very Middle Eastern family, oldest daughter, and I was the rebel child. I was the problem starter. I
Mm,
defied everything because
the
I from a
norms
young
in your family.
yeah, yeah, just from a young age I knew like this doesn't feel right for me. And there was a lot of challenges and conflict in my family and I had mental health challenges as a young age and it was the perfect blend of chaos to cause me to be like, screw this. I'm going to do what I think is best for me, regardless. And so much so, and I rebelled so much so that when I was 16, I ended up getting into a 4-year relationship where I was being sexually, emotionally, and mentally abused. But because I had rebelled so hard, I had told myself, I won't tell anybody. Nobody's going to know. I'm going to have to figure this out on my own. I have to figure out how to get out of this. And I finally did. And it took me years, years to feel any semblance of safety or security again because my entire life up to that point was rebel, prove I'm good enough, and don't let anyone see how insecure you actually are. I was deeply insecure, couldn't fight my way out of a paper bag, didn't know who I was then questioning my identity, questioning my sexuality, just questioning everything about myself. And it had taken a couple of years of kind of swinging back and forth until I finally found these mentors of mine who it was basically my out. It was that moment of, oh, there is something more than this. You can be more than this. And I was already in school for psychology, but it didn't ring true for me until I had met these people. And so I ended up moving out of my family's home. We started our organization. It was incredible. We were building, we were doing all of these amazing things, but we were growing at such an exponential rate that my insecurities had finally caught up to everything.
Oh,
Because I was the co founder of this organization and we were expanding and we had a 7-person team and I had a full time job and then doing this as a full time job. And it was like you signed up for something and you made yourself look like you are capable and you're not. You don't know how to do any of this. You didn't go to business school. You've been playing pretend your entire life.
mm,
And it caught up to me. And me and my business partner had to have a very, very difficult conversation where she was like, I love you so much. And I want to do this with you. But if this is going to be how this is going to be, I can't. So we have two choices. You either take a step back, still stay here, but like, you got to go figure yourself out. You need to learn, you need to grow, you need to develop, you need to become the woman that I know you're capable of being. Or we're going to split everything 50-50. I'll go my way, you go your way, and I'm going to build. And I had this moment and I was like, this was my deepest fear. I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
I'm not this person that I've pretended to be. I looked confident, but I wasn't capable of anything. And I was like, I have to do this. I have to prove that I'm actually capable of this. And so I did. And I had gotten my master's degree and I was doing therapy and I'm teaching people and I'm doing all of this incredible stuff. And I then had to do that work on me that I was helping everybody else do.
Yeah,
So
the
healing.
inner work. Like, yeah, a lot of
Exactly.
times people, they have, like, that mask, and, like, I'm in the arts, and a lot of times you'll see somebody on stage, right, and they project this one thing, that they're super confident or super,
Yeah.
like, beyond they're kind of projecting this other self,
Mhm.
but when it comes down to it, like, if you deal with them then when they're off the stage, they're not like that at all. And it's
Yeah.
kinda like they play and it's h sometimes it catches up with you, like you're saying, like, eventually there ends up being if you're playing that role and then people, like, expect you to be that way and then you're not, and then it starts to catch up with you and then you have to, like, look in like, the looking glass self, you have to do that analysis, is like, "Okay, who am I? Is this actually moving me forward, or am I kinda sliding back, or I'm not where I need to be?"
I was a shell of a human being pretending not to be. And when all of the opportunities finally came to me, I wasn't ready for it because I had been pretending for so long. And this is why I think fake it till you make it is destructive because it's inaccurate and it's not true. You'll fake it, you'll get opportunities, but you never actually cultivated the skills to be that person. So I had that moment and it was like, oh crap, what do I do here? And I just dive bombed into it. I started therapy again. I was already doing coaching, but I ramped up the coaching that I was doing. I ate my own medicine.
Mhm.
I started doing everything that I was telling everybody else to do, and it radically changed my life. I mean, I was healing from really old wounds that I didn't even know were there. I had cultivated skills and awarenesses that I never thought I was capable of, and now I work with 60 plus people on a weekly basis doing one-on-one therapy. We have our podcast that we do. I'm a speaker, I'm a leader. I do all of these incredible things, but none of it would have been possible if I didn't do that inner work on me that I had been pretending and running away from my entire life. And that really is what drives me and what motivates me. And that truly is the mission that I'm trying to help other people to see, which is that without that self love and real self love, not the fluffy feel good self love that we see out on in the world, but real inner self love, which is hard and painful and difficult and challenging. If you can cultivate that, you'll be capable of anything, anything within reason, obviously. Like, I'm not going to grow to 6 feet tall, but
Yeah.
anything is possible, but you have to do the work.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, culturally, like, we live in I was a sociology major, but there's an idea of like the microcosm and the macrocosm. Like,
Yes.
and then the microcosm in your family, like if you were pushed down or you're like in a situation where you don't feel like you're part of the whole, that
Mm,
you're the kind of outsider, and then you're not really uh I know you're kind of feeling those feelings of anomie. You're disconnected. You
mhm.
can be disconnected at the microcosm level and the macrocosm level. You're disconnected from your family, you're disconnected from society. Then you might put on like that mask, like you're saying, like you have this mask to kind of have a sense of safety, to be able to like not show your wounds. Like, I had a cat and a cat. they tend to kind of pretend when they're not sick. They got to put up a show. You don't even know they're really sick because they try to have that bravado. And it's like I think all beings try to do that to they just defend themselves.
We're all walking around with 100 pounds of armor up. Brene Brown talks about this very, very heavily, and I adore her work and I use a lot of what she talks about. But we are terrified of ourselves, and we're terrified of the world, and we're terrified of these three primary core limiting beliefs that is referred to in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I got my master's in. The feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of being unlovable, and the feeling of not being capable. So, like this hopelessness. We are all living our lives trying to pretend like that isn't there, and trying to pretend as though we don't have those insecurities and we don't have those fears. And we are not limited by these destructive inner narratives. And unfortunately, because we're pretending so hard that that's not there, we have to put more and more and more armor on. And it's why people are so burnt out and so depressed and so anxious, and trauma is running rampant, and addictions are sky high. It's because we're sedating ourselves from the reality because we're so afraid of actually facing it, that it's easier to just put all of these walls and barriers around us. And that is absolutely what I did. I mean, I was just jumping from relationship to relationship, person to person, situation to situation, because I didn't want to look in the mirror. I didn't want to look at, why am I repeating these cycles over and over again? Why am I in pain? What are the things that I keep telling myself? I wanted nothing to do with this. I'm like, hey, can you fix my life?
Yeah, it's almost
Yeah,
like people are
cool.
looking for that, like that, that safe space when they don't
Yeah,
realize they're carrying that, like their own inner space into every space they go into. And so they
100%.
thinking that that next space is going to solve it, or that next person's going to solve it, or some outside thing's going to solve the inner thing. And it's
Not
always that
realizing
inner
that you bring yourself.
everywhere. Like the
Yeah,
place isn't going to solve it. It's like that misery is going to go from place to place until you actually have that looking glass self hard conversation. Is
right.
why do I keep on having these bad loops? Is it the other person? Because we have a lot of people today. There's like the resentment thing or the other thing. People are these otherizers.
Mhm.
Like the reason I'm in trouble is because this person over here is causing, or this group of people over here is causing my pain. When actually, if you look at your patterns, they have nothing to do with it. It's like you have everything to do with it.
You bring yourself into every situation that you're in. You can't outrun yourself. Like, I've had many clients who have said, I just need to start fresh. I just need to go and move to a new city and, start all of these new situations, and the new job will do it, and a new relationship will do it, or a new apartment will do it. And it might be a temporary fix. You probably will feel better for a time, but only for a time, because your brain is still going to have to come into every situation that you're entering into, and patterns repeat unless you stop them. As human beings, we are very cyclical. We repeat the same patterns over and over and over again. Our brain is wired for it. Neurologically and biologically, the safest thing you can do is run a pattern you know works, whether it's destructive or not. So when we're running these same patterns over and over again, we have to see what those are in order to make real sustainable change. But it sucks.
It's
Doing the
hard.
work is brutal. Like, I tell all of my clients, I'm like, listen, therapy sucks and you're going to want to jump through the screen and punch me in the face half the time, but it's part of it. And if you're not, it's not always like doom and gloom, and it's not always terrible. It's amazing and it's wonderful. But there's a lot of difficulty mixed in with it. And if you're not willing or ready or capable of building yourself up to the point where you can look at the patterns and look at the cycles and understand why you do the things that you do, you're going to keep repeating it over and over again. And that's where people end up being 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, looking back at their life going, how the hell did I get here? I
Mhm.
didn't choose this life. This life kind of just happened to me. And it happens more than we think.
Well, a lot of times, like what I've seen is, what we perceive as human beings, like when we actually, what you hear and what you actually glean from things are kind of like prejudged by your own
Mhm.
prejudices and your own like yeah, you will like if they you have a situation. I was in like law classes, and we would do have a situation occur in front of us, like a crime, and then ask people what did they see.
Mhm.
Everybody in the class saw something different than what actually occurred.
Mhm.
They couldn't even describe the person that did it right. Everybody was describing it because they would walk out, and then you run the film, and you can see how things can happen because people project their own preferences or non-preferences or what their perceived concepts are, and so they would just prejudge it, and it wasn't actually what occurred. So that tells you there's a lot of stuff going on in your subconscious that are kind of controlling what you see, what you feel. And until you actually have some kind of critical thinking, it's like, why did I think that? Why did I do that? Does it actually match the situation? Am I
Right.
overcompensating? Am I undercompensating? What am I doing? And people don't like to do that critical thinking because it might go against their belief system. It
It's
might go,
critical thinking and emotional awareness. So you have to have the emotional intelligence to understand what are the emotional patterns that I'm facing too. We live our life through biases. So our brain creates these filters and these frames of how we interpret information, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we relate or don't relate. There's all of these patterns that, like I said, cyclical patterns that we run, and our brain is no different. Our brain is the cause of them. So we all have these biases. We all have these mental filters. They're called cognitive distortions, but we have these mental filters that we're taking in information through. So if my mental filter, let's say, is men are bad, then any man that walks around me, I'm going to automatically clench up and act differently because that's my filter. Whether I know it or not, our
mhm.
bodies will just react. So, yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Two people can see the same exact thing and they'll have radically different interpretations of it because we don't perceive information the exact same way. And unless we know how emotionally and physiologically we respond to situations, so the emotional intelligence component, and then the cognitive critical thinking of like, why did I think that? Why do I feel this? Why am I having these experiences? You'll never be able to make sustainable change.
You never break out of the pattern. You get in what we call like, a bad loop.
Right.
Like you just have this loop keeps on occurring. And, you get like I'm a musician. We have these ideas like, harmony, dissonance, distortion, noise. And so
Yeah.
when you're a musician, you can use all of those. But some people might lean into more harmonious things. But sometimes the discordance is necessary to bring things out. So there's this like how you color, how you filter, or what you see, what you perceive to bring to the front, to bring to the top. It's kind of like a filmmaker chooses to frame that scene and make you have a certain emphasis. It's like what you're talking about, like cognitive dissonance, is like we're doing that, but people can you can reframe that, you can reprogram yourself. But that's like you're saying, the hard work, right?
Just as a funny aside, I tried teaching myself to play guitar. So I was a very musical child. Like I loved music. I played piano, I played violin, didn't last in them unfortunately because of just life circumstances. I tried teaching myself to play guitar last year. That was a nightmare. I got pretty good at it, but like after a certain point it's like it's hard to teach yourself like unless you have a teacher there kind of showing you the strings and everything.
Yeah, it is. It's like, it depends on if you have the aptitude. Some people, you get like a
Right.
Mozart, Beethoven, Prince, like they pick up something, they just pick up multiple things. Other times it's harder work. It's like the work that you have to do. It's like the 10,000
Mm.
hours you have to put in to be like an athlete, to be a musician, to
Yeah.
be an actor. There's a certain level that you have to be able to, it's like, do you really want it? The musician is some they made a decision like, I'm gonna keep on playing until somebody says, "Oh, that is music." Right? That they actually, they actually get to a point where they get that base level of competence to have that kind of muscle memory that it's not you're not thinking about it. You're not
Mm.
thinking, "I can't do it." Like, a musician, like, they're on their instrument. They're not thinking they can't play it because they got past that point. You have to get that point of, expertise where you actually, have that inner confidence that you're
Well, I'm
not gonna
sure you
fail.
know as a
Yeah.
I'm sure you know as a musician too, you don't just get to a point where you're never nervous or you're never questioning yourself or you're never experiencing doubt. I really do believe that that is a common misconception that a lot of people have, which is that once I do the work, everything is going to be fine. Once I get to a certain level, everything is going to be fine. I'm never going to struggle again. I'm never going to have hardship again. And unfortunately, a lot of what's out there nowadays is propagating that. There's a lot of really destructive misinformation of 30 days to thrive and these 10-day boot camps and
Oh, yeah.
whatever. And it's a nice start. It is. And I commend anybody who tries that. But you also have to understand that there's no quick fixes. There's there's never going to be a point where you're just 100% sure of yourself in every situation. You never struggle, you never have a negative emotion, you never have a negative thought. It doesn't exist. It's not real. But because we don't like pain and we're so afraid of discomfort, we're clinging to this hope that, oh my God, I really hope that this is real. I really hope this is a thing. I hope it is true that I'm never going to have to struggle again. And it's just not the reality. But to what you were saying about the distortions and the noise and all of that, if you can learn, I'm capable of handling whatever life throws at me, that is a way more adaptive, healthy, functional, productive belief. And that's what I really had to learn because I very much was someone that was like, one day I'm not going to struggle anymore. One day I'm not going to be in pain anymore. One day everything is going to get better. And one day never comes. But what you do get is, oh, I couldn't handle this last time I tried this, but I'm not as scared this time. Or you're more willing to put yourself out there a little bit. Or when a challenge comes, you don't get as emotionally dysregulated as you did the last time. And it's these gradual progressions over the span of your lifetime and over the span of your time engaging in these habits and these patterns that you slowly build these skills and you slowly start to get better. And when challenge comes and when difficulty comes, because it's inevitably going to, it's not that you're not going to feel negativity. It's not that you're not going to have negative thoughts. It's that you can work through them faster. You can get the result faster and you understand where those thoughts and feelings are coming from.
It's kinda like, well, yeah, I'm an experimental kinda jazz musician, so the idea is you get a base level of competence, but then you live in the present moment. So there's
Mm,
with the idea there's no bad note, there's an opportunity. It's like a fusion jazz artist, like, if somebody plays a note that's unexpected, they figure out what note goes with it, and they don't say they
you
have
just
to start
follow it.
from the top. You actually figure out the note that will go with it, and you won't even know that that group actually anybody made a mistake, versus somebody says, "Oh, we gotta take it from the top. We gotta redo it," because if you're going off of sheet music, you're playing like Bach or Beethoven, you have a certain expectation, that's what it is. You can
Yeah.
play with the way you interpret it to a certain degree, but there's not a lot of room to move. With a like a jazz opera musician, they're living in the present moment. They're
Right.
taking they could go any different direction at any different time, if their level of competence allows them to do that because they're not scared of the unknown or the newfound sound or the newfound opportunity. That is actually why they're in it because that is not uncomfortable. That is actually the level of discomfort or an unknown is actually exciting to like a creative. That's where you get your juices. That's why you get up in the morning because you don't know where the music is going to go because
What a
you
great analogy.
you live to like kind of get these downloads and be able to trust in your subconscious and say, yeah, I can go into a flow state at any time. And it's okay, even if it wasn't what I planned to do. The problem I think with a lot of people is they have this plan and something comes and deviates the plan and then they can't handle it because they want to stay on plan.
Our pain. So let me backtrack. Our brain is wired for certainty, predictability, and control. That's it. Our brain at any given moment is looking for, can I predict what's going to happen next? Do I have a sense of control? And is there any sense of certainty? So we live our entire lives trying to stay in this very narrow frame to ensure we have certainty, predictability, and control. Because anything outside of that is potential danger. And so at all times, our brain is basically asking the question, how do I stay in homeostasis? How do I stay in homeostasis? When we're living our life based on that, you're not going to take risks and you're not going to put yourself out there and you're not going to use your jazz metaphor, give yourself an opportunity to play the wrong note. Because if your entire sense of self is based on following it perfectly and doing it perfectly and no pain and no challenge and no risk, you're not going to put yourself out there. And again, that's what I did for so long. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again because this is certain and I can control this. Even though it's causing chaos, at least it's certain. There's
Mhm.
certainty in this chaos. There's predictability in this chaos. And it wasn't until I had a few major like oh shit moments, for lack of a better phrase,
Mhm.
of my life is going to be destroyed. If I keep doing this, I'm going to destroy my life. I was abused. I had all of these terrible things happen. I had severe mental health stuff that I was going through, and it wasn't until like a brick house finally fell on me that it was like, now what are you going to do? And it's unfortunate because so many people don't change their life until they get to that point. And hopefully, a show like this and an episode like this will help people to see that the most predictability, the most certainty, the most control, it actually doesn't come from the external environment. It comes from your sense of self. How firmly and how certain am I in me that I can handle challenges, that I can handle the lack of predictability, that I can handle control? The only reason that you as a jazz musician is able to follow a note if someone hits a wrong note is because the level of mastery that you got up to that point, to where it's like if something happens, okay, no big deal, follow it. Something happens, okay, no big deal, follow it. This is the same exact thing. But if someone hits a wrong note and you freak out, the entire number gets ruined. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing in life.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people, I think society's kind of primed for predictability, with
Mhm.
markets, businesses, they want to know my supply chain can't change or I can't make business decisions. I need the environment to stay stable so I can grow my crop. But when you run into situations where there's multiple divergence, you got climate divergence, you got market divergence, you got cultural divergence, you got all these things, AI's coming in. We're living in this age where there's like multiple things changing at once. And
Mhm.
a lot of our structure is dependent on things being, our cities are built near water that's rising, climates that were set to a certain, degree. And now if that goes above that, it's like, well, what are we going to do? You know, because there's a certain level of predictability that human beings like you're saying, it's kind of primed for it. And but if you go back to like indigenous cultures, they wouldn't stay in the same place.
Mhm.
They would move. But kind of our modern civilization says, "Oh, to have our culture, we have to stay in that spot." And so it's everything's kind of primed from this trying to stay in the box. Even though people say they want to have out of the box thinking. If you look at what we do, we try to stay in the box.
Out of the box thinking requires so much self-awareness and so much work that people like the idea of it and they like the fantasy of it, but the reality is very different. Like, even think of the idea of fame, for example. Everyone loves the idea of being famous. How many famous people have completed suicide? Because they finally get to it and it's like, this is not what I thought this was going to be. This is way worse than I thought it was going to be, or this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And they can't handle it because they didn't develop the skill sets to be able to handle what was coming.
Yeah, it's like you look at the 28 Club, you look at Janis Joplin, Hendrix, Morrison, and these were all people at the top of their game. They were like the best of the best in their genre. But in terms of like their life handling capabilities, they had weaknesses that caught up with them, that they couldn't they didn't address. Because they didn't address it, they're not here. So that happens like that. Those pressure points that sometimes what you think you want, like people say, I want $1 million. Why do you want the $1 million? Because they think the
Mhm.
$1 million are going to solve all the problems. But everybody knows rich people that they have all the money in the world and they're not happy at all because they
Mhm.
never solved the underlying conditions of their insecurities or anything that was going on. And so they continue to project it. And he was like, why are they doing these crazy things? They should have be happy. They're a billionaire. But then they're doing all these things. Well, how could they be so unstable? They got all the money in the world. But that doesn't mean that that solves the problem.
We have these very misguided beliefs of what real happiness actually is. We have very misguided beliefs about what it means to be a happy, confident, well rounded person. And it's why so many people are going to suffer for a really long time because we have no clarity on what it actually is. It's not glitz and glamour and the fluffy feel good. It's the challenge and it's the difficult and it's the inner work and the, you know, daily focus, but people want things to be easy because, again, we're trying to run away from pain. We don't like discomfort. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like not having predictability. And when you have a core belief of, I can't handle hard things, of course you're going to look for something quick to fix it. But what happens when you get that thing and it didn't fix anything? Like with me, the next relationship is gonna make me love myself. No, 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 okay, this next one, this next relationship, no, 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 this is gonna be the one. But then you get it and the same pattern happens, and then you feel worse about yourself. Real happiness, like real authentic happiness, it doesn't feel good. And that doesn't make sense, but it does if you actually think about it because real happiness is about optimal human flourishing. Martin Seligman talks about this. He's the person who came up with um, learned helplessness and learned optimism, and he's done a lot of other work as well. But one of the things that he talks about is this concept of human flourishing, and human flourishing is based on positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Positive emotions is only one aspect of it. And positive emotions doesn't mean you feel good all the time. Positive emotions is I can regulate my state. I can regulate my inner world and get myself through whatever is going to come up.
Mhm.
That is real success. That is real flourishing. Everything else is a byproduct of that. If you want real success, if you want a magnificent relationship, if you want money, if you want the home, the clothes, everything, you're not going to get it by focusing on that. You get it by focusing on who is the type of person that I have to become in order to have, attract, and maintain those things. And when we spend our entire lives feeling so bad about ourselves that we're trying to fake it till we make it and pretend and not actually cultivate the skills, you're never going to get it. And then you get to live in this fantasy of, well, what if? Well, what if? Well, what if?
It's also like in terms of sometimes you're trying to project this fantasy or this ideal vision. And instead of like, navigating what is, like if you're navigating the ocean and you have to be able to get through the storm, and sometimes it's not gonna be a
Mhm.
storm, but you can't just have this picture that the ocean's always gonna be calm, and I'm only gonna be happy when the ocean's calm. You have to deal with the weather as it is. The world is gonna be tornadoes and thunderstorms and bright sunny days, and, it's not always gonna be the bright sunny day. You have to be able to get through the thunderstorm and not
Exactly.
not just fall apart when it happens. And I think some people are trying to make their life that there's never gonna be a thunderstorm. There's never gonna be a blizzard. And if there is, I don't know what to do. It's like so I that always is the hard rub with like when you're a musician, some people are always looking for like the perfect track. There's no such thing as the perfect track. A lot of times the imperfect thing, the happy accident, the thing that has like actual errors in it, or it has issues. But that's art. Art sometimes is not imperfect, and in its imperfection, that's what the beauty of it. And because we live in this world with technology, people in the arts sometimes are spending so much time with the tech, trying to force some kind of harmonious nature to something that doesn't necessarily need to be harmonious in that moment.
Mm.
And it's a problem.
Chaos theory and Murphy's law are very, very real. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like the world, like entropy and chaos and Murphy's law and all of these things. The world is chaotic and life is chaotic and it's unpredictable. And there's so little we actually have control over in the external world. But the thing we will always have control over is ourselves. It's what we think, what we feel, and what we do. It's called the cognitive triad in cognitive behavioral therapy. What you think, what you feel, and what you do, your entire life is made up of that. And then the core beliefs that are generating what you think, feel, and do. So, like the biases and the assumptions and the
Mm,
unconscious and the subconscious and whatever. So, if you spend your life instead of focusing on what's the next thing I can get, because this is when my life really, really started to change. I very, very much was what can I get? What can I get? How can I feel good? How can I feel better? How can I get out of pain? And when my life really started to change was when I said, who can I become? What are the things that I can learn? What are the lessons that I can try to get out of this situation? How can I learn to be able to handle anything that happens? And how can I learn to love everything in here? Because
mhm.
nobody would have known it, but I was a deeply insecure person. Like you never would have known it. You would have thought I was the most confident person ever. I was deeply, deeply insecure. I hated myself. And that didn't change until I started living by that mindset of I'm not focusing on what I can get. I'm going to focus on who I can become. And everything I wanted came as a byproduct of that. It's like instead of focusing on the goal, you focus on who you have to become and you'll end up surpassing the goal. Like I
Yeah.
never thought that I would be in the position that I'm in right now. I co-lead a team. We're hiring clinicians for our therapy practice and I'm going to be, leading the charge on all of that. We're growing all of these things. We have the podcast. I work with 60 plus clients between both of my jobs. It's insane. I speak on podcasts like this. I host seminars. I do all of this stuff. I never thought that I would be this person. If you told me 6 years ago, hey, In 6 years, this is where you're going to be. I would have laughed in your face. And the people in my life would have laughed in your face. They would have been like, there's no way she can't do that.
Mhm.
And
I
I'm
think, yeah.
only here. Yeah, I'm only here now because I focused on, I just want to get as good as I can possibly get. I want to be as good as I can possibly be. And focusing on that, it changed everything. And I know it's possible for others because it was possible for me, because I was a mess of a human being, like severely mentally unwell, couldn't have a relationship to save my life, very minimal friendships, consistently getting in conflict with my family, no self-worth, no self-love, and now I'm this person I never imagined I could be, and there's still so far to go. And that is possible for anybody and everybody who's willing to take the next right step.
So it's the work you have to do because you're never really done. It's like the idea, like you continually develop. In my day job, I'm a software developer, and
Mm,
in software design, it's exponential. Like what we knew in the '70s is like what we do today, and like we're it's exponential growth in the technology.
right,
Our baselines constantly shift. We're constantly we're always students. We always know that what we don't know. The technology exponentially expands. So you can't like whatever you know today is not what's going to be tomorrow. And you know that you have to continually learn and improve yourself and not think that you're like I'm a know-it-all. You can't have this like no, I know everything under the sun because it's not true. Because like there's so many different you know, concepts, and they're coming
right.
from everywhere, and they're not just coming from the West. They're coming from the East. They're coming from all over the planet. So it's not so you get a cultural bias could be a problem if you think it's only coming from here. You have to be open to a lot of possibilities because it's a wide open space, and it's elite makes you. I think if you have that mindset where it's more expansive than contractive, I think a lot of people would say, "Well, just stay in your lane."
Mhm.
And, like, I found, like, I can't stay in one lane.
The name of our organization is called Evolve Ventures Technologies LLC. And when my business partner Amelia and I first started, we actually just started off as a podcast called the Why Power Podcast. And she's a genius, and she predicted the fact that like everything is going to go to audio eventually. So we did like a experiment, and we got all of our devices, and we would say like, "Hey Siri or Alexa," or I don't want my devices to go off. So like, "Hey, insert, whatever the tech tool is here. Search the Why Power podcast."
Mhm.
And it said the White Power podcast. And we're like, no, 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 that's not what this is. No, 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 that's not what this is. So we after a couple of years, we were like, okay, we need to do a rebrand. Who is it that we want to be? What is the message that we want to embody? What do we really stand for? And I'll never forget this. We took a week. I had taken a week off of work, and she was still at her full-time job at the time. And she worked in the tech industry and or biotech. And we were in her home because she had bought a home. And we're in her home, and we're up in her office. And for hours, we have whiteboards everywhere, and we're sitting on the floor, and we have food, and we have our computers. And we're really contemplating, who are the women that we want to be? What do we want to be known for? What is the message that we have, that we want to share with the world? And it took us a couple of hours, but we decided on the word, or we decided on the name Evolve Ventures. Ventures, because this is an adventure. We are all on this journey. We all have the capacity to go on these magnificent explorations and journeys and adventures if we decide to, and if we're willing to. And what inevitably is going to happen is you are going to evolve, because that is the reality of the world. Human evolution is, scientifically, biologically, it is the reality of the universe, and everything is evolving, everything is changing, everything is growing, everything is never ending in whatever direction you're headed in, whether it's up, down, side to side,
Yeah.
dynamically, whatever. And so we decided on Evolve Ventures because our life is a journey of growth. And if you're willing to develop that mindset, and if you're willing to really sink into that, your life has the potential to sincerely be extraordinary on your terms. Not because somebody else tells you what it should be, but because it's your terms. Like, I am absolutely not living the life my parents wanted me to live. They
Yeah.
wanted me to be married and have babies by now to a Middle Eastern man and be a doctor or whatever. And it's like, that
Yeah.
wasn't
That's the
me.
kind of rub that we have today with because we're having this, we're at this precipice of this new age of
Yeah.
unlimited capability, right? But there's a lot of people that find that frightening.
Mhm.
There are other people that want to go back to, like, 16th century, 15th century. There's people in the world that don't like the tech.
Yeah.
They don't like the possibilities. They don't like multiculturalism. They don't like diversity. They don't like open mindedness. And then we have these people that want to go, to Mars. They want to look, beyond, inner worlds, outer worlds, anywhere, any possibility. And there are other people that say, no, I don't believe in science. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in possibility. I want very restrictive. So we're running into this kind of pendulum. It's like, which way is it going to go, depending on like who wants to gain control. But you have control of yourself.
Yeah. Right.
So people don't have to work for some company to get all their dreams come true. They can create their own idea. We're
Mhm.
living in a world where we can all be entrepreneurs. But there are some people who maybe don't have that mindset. They think they have to work for some structure, to be who they are. And well, we're living in this world where people can actually self-actualize a lot more than what our parents would have thought, or our grandparents would have thought. And it's just it's all mindset.
Yeah. You have to find the path that's right for you. There is no right path for everybody. It just doesn't exist. For some people, they don't want to be an entrepreneur. They want to be able to have a very steady job, consistent income, and then they want to be able to adventure within their life outside of work. For other people, it's the exact opposite, and there's everyone in between. The goal and the purpose isn't to follow this one script. It's to understand, who am I? What's going to give me the best quality of life based on that? And how can I be the most flourishing version, the most self loving, abundant version of me based on my core values, my beliefs, my aspirations, and what really matters to me? And that's where something like therapy, especially with a good therapist, really comes into play, because you have that opportunity to figure that out. Who are you without these biases? Who are you without these limitations? Who are you at your core? And then how do we build a life around that? And if everybody were to do that, this world would be so much of a better place, because we wouldn't need to fight with each other to get our needs met. We would know what our needs are and feel capable of meeting them. And that wouldn't require us fighting each other.
Yeah, I mean, I was a political science major and sociology major, but there's a lot of political trends that are more repressive than uplifting. Just because
Absolutely.
some people find it very comfortable to have their lives kind of planned for them. And so there's a dichotomy, like, do you want to have, is it easier for you to have somebody plan your life out
Mhm.
and then you don't have to, you can go autopilot? Or do you want to actually be able to self actualize, however that is? And we're kind of living in a world that's going in those directions. And one direction actually limits your ability to do anything you want, and the other direction is more open. So
Yeah. Too much restriction or too much certainty is or uncertainty, there are extremes. It's like I said, it's a spectrum. It's just finding what is right for you. But then also make sure you're not projecting that onto other people because that's a radically different person sitting in front of you. Like what's right for you is radically different than what's right for me. And that's okay. That's the point of being here. It's figuring out who am I? What is right for me? How can I do that and not trample on somebody else?
Yeah, the problem is I'll just end with this idea of if somebody's freedom, if their idea of freedom is to actually repress your freedom,
Mm,
yeah, then that's very not productive to the overall society.
yeah,
But
very true.
but, and so that becomes a situation where that if that is allowed, then no one else can actually self-actualize. So
Mm.
that becomes like the fight that we had back in the 30s. But, you know, people are doomed to repeat their history if they don't understand it.
Yeah, a lot of trauma is what causes people to do stuff like that.
But I wanna thank you for being on the show. We're kinda at the end point, today, but we do have your Evolve Adventures Tech, .com, website. I'm not gonna repeat the whole URL because people will be able to click on that in the podcast description. We've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen or watch a podcast by tomorrow, and I wanna thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much again for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.